40 years ago, we opened our doors with one mission in mind.
We'll be right back with the top 10 songs of 1983.
To sell quality American-made vehicles at a fair price.
You have arrived.
And we've loved every minute of the ride. Celebrating 40 years of Two Rivers Ford.
Morning. Hope everybody's off to a great start on this Friday. Love to have you guys in for the next 3 hours. Thanks for hanging out with us today. Lucas and I, we got you until 1 o'clock. Jump in at any point. 615-737-1045 is the number. Coach Mack will be on at 11:20. We'll be keeping track of all the things going on with the Masters today, but there's a place that I got to start in particular. How about your Nashville Predators, bud? UC Saros, 33 saves in goal last night. Carolina shutout at Bridgestone Arena, 3-0. And the Preds are within a point now of both the Jets and the Flames for that second wild card spot in the Western Conference. It's I can't tell you the last time we opened Preds, probably not since David Poyle, right? With the whole announcement around his situation and
Barry Trotz
stepping up. But the Preds look like they might have more than signs of life. That was comforting to see from a team that's been kind of in exploratory mode, for lack of a better term. And we talked about it a little bit yesterday, I think, towards the end of the show. The kind of roster that they're putting out is basically from the AHL. It's a lot of young dudes who are trying to figure out how they fit in a system that I don't know what the lifespan or the life cycle of this system is going to be. Do we have any idea what's going to happen with John Hines? We haven't talked about this since Barry Trotz.
There's very little that we know about the future of the Preds franchise personnel-wise. But you talk about a parting gift from David Poyle. He has to get a lot of credit for what's happening here because this is basically his entire farm system somehow keeping the heartbeat alive for the Preds' playoff hopes.
Sure, but it took a pretty big Band-Aid to rip off and a ton of injuries for these guys to see the light of day. And listen, if they get into the playoffs, I mean, just to make it would, I think, exceed any reasonable expectation at this point. So whatever happens, even if it feels kind of gross like last year against the Avalanche, where UC has that incredible game. How many saves did he have in that one game, too, that they lost, but he set like a record? I can't remember exactly what went down there. But if they couldn't pull that one off, then you felt like, okay, they're kind of dead on arrival. So maybe this year's team is, too, if they're to make it. But even still, it's a totally different vibe around this because these are basically totally different players. And you're trying to figure out what the future of this franchise is going to look like and what you have to build upon. And right now, it looks promising. They got a lot of things they got to iron out. And last night was one of their better performances since these roster changes, since these lineup changes. They've kind of had their hand forced on all the different things that they've had to adjust. But, yeah, huge opportunity for the Preds with the NHL's toughest remaining strength of schedule to get that 3-0 win last night. I really hope they make it. I think this has been pretty cool to watch. Like, just the idea of figuring out how to win in any sport. I don't know what moment you would kind of quantify or that you would point to in any team's given season where you're looking at a younger roster that might be on the precipice of doing something, maybe not necessarily something special. We're not talking about them going on any kind of run. I think we can keep expectations pretty reasonable. But to kind of see the different peaks and valleys that this team has gone through, where most of us start to pay attention a little later in the season, and then you see a little bit of stagnation around them. They blow things up as front as the, I don't want to call it a blow up with the front office. They've figured out a succession plan that amounts to a pretty substantial shakeup given the stature of the person that Barry Trotz is coming in to replace, even though David Poyle's not like leaving the organization. He's still going to be around. But yeah, Lucas, I think your point is correct. Like, David Poyle has to feel pretty gratified about the position that he put his franchise in. And that's always the concern. When you have a changing of the guard, not even one like this, because there's not many like this where you've just had one general manager for the entire existence of your franchise. You're always concerned about, is the person who either is on their way out or has one foot out the door, are they making decisions in the best interest of the long-term sustainability of the franchise, or are they just making moves right now to try and squeeze one more good thing out of this while they're overseeing it, while they're running the show? And it looks like David Poyle, at least so far, early returns in a small sample size, but it looks like they've got at least something to work with moving forward into the future, where it might have felt a little more bleak when they kind of made the move to transition Poyle out.
So you mentioned the strength of schedule. Huge games this weekend, in Winnipeg tomorrow, in Calgary on Monday, and then back home, 2-game homestand finishes out the regular season against Minnesota and Colorado, both who have clinched, both who will be pushing for a 1 seed in the Western Conference. So the hope of one of those two teams resting players is not very high right now. But the playoff race in the National Hockey League is fascinating across the board. You've got the Preds, the Flames, and the Jets within 1 point of each other, all fighting to the death for that final wild card spot in the West. And then even in the East, where you have the Panthers, the Islanders, and the Penguins all scrapping for the last 2 wild card spots in the Eastern Conference. And then the race for the 1 seed in the West between Colorado, Dallas, and Minnesota. It's going to be a really fun finish to the NHL season, and the Preds have, like you said, the toughest schedule to get to that point. So if they are able to reach the finish line here with this group of players and the amount of guys missing, name a Predators player. He's injured. Like any player you can name off the top of your head, or average Preds fan that goes to 4 or 5 games a year can name off the top of their head. Matt Duchene, Roman Josi, Ryan Johansson, injured or traded. They were sellers at the trade deadline.
That's right.
They were left for dead. And here they are.
I don't know why. I don't know why I had such a passion about Calle Yarncroke getting traded. Or no, not Yarncroke. Who got traded recently that was playing really well? This is how closely I've paid attention until the end of the season. How long has Calle Yarncroke been gone?
It's been a while.
Okay.
You called me at midnight after the trade deadline, just fuming about Mikael Granlund getting dealt.
Mikael Granlund, damn it.
You were so mad. I was like, Buck, go to sleep. It's 1 a.m.
I'm a little more casual with it, but I think they're exciting. I think they're exciting. You know what I'm saying? Because you're right. You're talking to me. Like, name a Predators player. I couldn't until I watched a full game for the first time. I don't know. It'd been a couple of weeks. Like, I'll catch a period here or there while it's on in the background. I'm doing primetime or I'm working or something. But I'm a little more casual with it until we get closer to the postseason and, yeah, find out if they're worth a damn or not. And I turned it on. I'm like, who the hell is this Novak dude? He's kind of good. He had one. What do you mean he had 1 goal all of last season? And now he's like one of their better scorers out there. Evangelista is somebody I just learned existed the other day. Like, this is how I think a lot of people, maybe not a lot of people, but people are just kind of, okay, March Madness taking up a lot of your attention span. Basketball's going on. Postseason in the NBA and the NHL getting closer. So if you've been more casual with it like I have, then you're looking around and be like, who the hell is this team? Who are these people? But they're close. And that's the exciting part.
The city of Nashville is taking on the entire country of Canada this weekend. The Preds play Winnipeg and Calgary twice in the course of the next 3 days or so, and the Nashville SC hosting Toronto tomorrow night.
So are we going to declare ourselves an anti-Canada show?
for
Are we going to
today-
rally behind the Predators' cause?
For today, we are anti-Canada.
I know there's not. I don't know a lot of people that moved down here from Canada, but I know a handful of people, and they're just such lovely human beings. It's
They
hard for me to
really
say that
are.
I'm anti-Canada.
They really are. We talked to Jacob Schaffelberg, the Nashville winger from Toronto, playing his former club Saturday. What a lovely human to talk
No,
to.
bleep that guy this week. Bleep that guy.
No, it's a Jacob Schaffelberg revenge game. What are you talking
Okay,
about?
you call the games. You can't say that. I
Yeah.
can. Bleep Canada.
But yes, Nashville's rising up against Canada this weekend.
I love it. 615-737-1045 is the number. Yeah, it's going to be interesting because there's a couple of teams. Like I saw the Kraken just clinched the postseason last night, and the Preds, with those games remaining, like Lucas just said, have a pretty tough road to go. But if they're going to, I would rather them have a challenge like this to learn as much as humanly possible about these young players. Because you brought up the idea of resting, right? What was it a couple of years ago that they had a series against the Flames, maybe 2 years ago, to end their regular season, and that was going to be their first round opponent. I think Pekka was still out there at the time. And they had Calgary rested a bunch of players. Pekka had like a crazy last game with the amount of saves he was able to make. I can't remember the exact numbers, just generally what was going on around the time. And it felt a little different because ultimately I believe they lost that playoff series to the Calgary Flames.
Are you talking about last season?
Is it last season?
No, well, what happened last season was a loss to Calgary late in the year that screwed up an opportunity to avoid Colorado in the first round.
I thought there was a series, like a couple of games at the end of the year. It was a weird situation. A couple of games at the end of the year where they played Calgary in the last couple of games of the regular season a first-round series against
They played Carolina at the end of the year. So
Carolina?
Pekka's last, and Carolina was resting a bunch of people, but they beat Carolina that last game, the Pekka game, 30 saves.
That's what I'm thinking
Like
of.
his goodbye game.
Right. Carolina rested a bunch of people.
Yeah.
At the end of
but
the
they
season.
did. The Preds blew it against Cal. They blew a largely 3-0, 4-0 lead against Calgary late last season. And basically blew an opportunity to avoid Colorado. And they do end up playing Colorado in the first round and got swept.
Well, because that's the question. And somebody in the Zone TV chat, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch asks it correctly. Vandy Chris 24. If the Preds slip in, do we call that fool's gold or promising for the future? And that's kind of what I want to learn. That's basically my larger point. I mixed up the Calgary Flames and the Carolina Hurricanes. But I want to see them play tougher competition, even if it's, even if the odds are stacked against them, for lack of a better term. Like, even in a loss, even in a losing effort, even if they, try their damnedest and can't make the postseason, I feel like there's still a learning opportunity about what this team may have to offer in future seasons with younger players on the roster. Because, it's just felt like the same crew year in, year out. And now this is different out of necessity, but it's showing you something that, I think everybody's at least a curiosity at this point, which is more than you could say about them around the trade deadline. Now they got people's attention. Let's get into a conversation around the Titans, and particularly the NFL draft. We talk about how the NFL draft is an imperfect science. Well, we've got a little bit of a test to prove just exactly that coming up next. We'll tell you what's going on and with these mock draft. What are we calling this? We testing these mock drafts? Something sexier than that. I don't know what to call it. Either way, we're gonna show you how flawed an exercise this is coming up next. So we know that the draft is not a perfect science. And, no matter how many different times, how many different manipulations, do you still do the Draft Network simulator? I know people were like crack addicts with that for a while.
I've never been a mock draft guy as far as I'll read them, but I never do them myself.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, see, I think it's far more interesting to do them with these simulators than to just read names on a website or a sheet of paper or whatever. Just the same names in a different order, varying by week to week, and sometimes, for good reason with meaningful information coming in, but largely it's just the same kind of stuff from one day to the next, from one mock to the next. But we know that it's not a perfect science, and it's even harder to predict this stuff accurately. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the final mock drafts of the 2022 season from Todd McShay and Mel Kiper. Now, it just so happens that they're both from ESPN. I guess we could have done Mel Kiper and Daniel Jeremiah, or Mel Kiper and just some different, combination of mock draft people, but we just took the two on ESPN as an example. So I'm going to read who each analyst had at each pick, and Lucas is going to tell us who actually got picked, just to see how many they actually got right between the two of them, okay? So let's start with Mel. Mel?
So lame.
I know, but I almost, it's, you want to know what's really lame? I don't get upset when you railroad me with sound that makes me actually think you tried to put some effort into a segment today. Like, it makes me happy, even though it flusters me and it completely throws me off my professional broadcaster game. I love that is there. Anyway, Mel Kiper. So, looking at the first round for Mel, he had Trayvon Walker, the defensive end for Georgia, who ended up being the first overall pick, going to the Jags. The Detroit Lions selecting Aiden Hutchinson with the second overall pick. He had Ike Ekwonu to the Houston Texans, the tackle out of NC State.
Derek Stingley Jr., the third overall pick in the 2022 draft to Houston.
And two promising rookies for Houston. We'll get to Dameon Pierce. Well, I guess Dameon Pierce wasn't a first-round pick.
No.
Out of Florida. But those two, Stingley and Dameon Pierce, they got shut down at the end of the year for their own good, basically, because the Texan season was lost, and Lovie Smith won one for the boys at the end, won one for the Bears at the end, it would seem, to play Houston out of the first overall pick in this year's draft. But Ike's a good player. And the explanation, like if you'd have told me that the top tackle in last year's draft went third overall, I wouldn't have been surprised. But I do think that Derek Stingley Jr., in this particular division, I thought he made a lot of sense at the time. It was a good pick.
You said that Kiper had that one wrong.
Kiper had Ike to the Houston Texans.
Okay. What did McShay have?
Well, we haven't done McShay's yet.
We're stick with, okay.
I think we should do Mel's first, and then we should do, it's just easier for us to track. So, at 4 to the Jets, Sauce Gardner. Mel doing pretty good so far.
Just one miss?
Now, you would say, well, those are the most obvious. The top, let's say the top 10, right? I would say probably most people have a higher percentage of hitting on draft picks, higher in the draft order, because I think the needs are most obvious, and that's typically where the premium positions go. At 5, the New York Giants, Mel Kiper had them selecting Charles Cross, the tackle from Mississippi State.
The pick was Kayvon Thibodeau, the defensive end out of Oregon.
Now, he missed some time and then, was more, I think, discussed for his behavior than he was his play. With the what he did something disrespectful, or that was considered disrespectful. I don't remember it being actually
when he
disrespectful.
sacked Nick Foles, and he was doing a snow angel celebration on the field while Nick Foles was right next to him, writhing in pain.
Oh, because that's the hit that knocked Nick Foles out.
Yeah, like Nick Foles was very injured and was clearly in in great pain, and Thibodeau was like a yard to his right doing a snow angel.
Okay, so maybe a too soon situation. Like maybe just wait a little bit.
And then Jeff Saturday obviously expressed his displeasure, and Thibodeau said, "I have no idea who that is."
I don't know who Jeff Saturday is. That's right. You know what? I'm back in on Kayvon Thibodeau. Objectively, like I'm sure that's terrible for Nick Foles. I hope he's okay. But like that's objectively funny to like look back a couple months later and just the idea of a giant human being on the ground writhing in pain while Kayvon Thibodeau, another giant human being who's just taken that giant human being to the ground, is doing a snow angel next to him.
But I really feel like Thibodeau missed the mark with the "I don't even know who you are" to Jeff Saturday. Like I feel like you not knowing who former All-Pro center and the head coach of the team you were playing against is more of a knock on you than it is on him.
Maybe, but like I'm always surprised with how little players know about other players, if that makes sense. Because they're just studying numbers on film. Like, they don't know who, like, that's why I hate the top 100, because the players vote on it, and they don't actually pay attention to these things. They're working on Sundays. There's no way that they could see a representative sample size of these guys that they need to see to make an accurate assessment on the top 100 players in the NFL.
All right, so Kuiper, 3 for 5 in the 2022 last mock draft he had.
The Carolina Panthers, he has taking an offensive tackle, but not the one that they ended up taking. He had them selecting Evan Neal, who did go 5th to the Giants.
No, Neal went 7th.
Neal went 7th. Wait, who did you say?
Giants took Thibodeau.
That's right.
5th.
Okay. So then the Giants had a pick from the Bears that he has selecting Jermaine Johnson, so another defensive end, an edge rush player, but who in fact went 7th. That was Neal.
Yeah. The Panthers took Ekwonu 6, and Giants took Evan Neal. Back-to-back tackles, 6 and 7.
Falcons at 8, Garrett Wilson, the wide receiver.
They did take a receiver. Took Drake London.
Drake London was the first wide receiver taken in that class?
Yep. 8th overall pick.
I just have such a hard time assessing either him or Kyle Pitts.
It was all defense and offensive line until that 8th overall pick last season or last year.
That's pretty interesting. I just think that speaks to the strength of the draft and how poorly we all imagined the quarterback situation was going to be.
Who's calling you?
I don't know.
Outham.
Outham? I don't know the number.
Say it.
No, I don't know the number. It's calling me from Louisville, Kentucky. I don't know people in Louisville, Kentucky. I mean, actually, that's not true. I know people in Louisville, but I don't know who it is. Do you want to pick up? Should we put it on? Should I just hold it to the microphone?
Yeah.
I don't like that idea.
Put it on speaker, hold it to the mic.
This is like that game they were playing in the Titans locker room. Who's the most famous person in your phone? And then they ask a follow-up. Can we FaceTime them?
Do it.
And no, I'm not doing that.
Oh, you coward.
Okay. Yeah, I don't like that. I don't like that game.
Who did Kuiper have with the 9th pick?
9th overall. He had the Seahawks taking Derek Stingley Jr.
They took Charles Cross, tackle out of Miss State.
Who started a lot better than he finished the season. I was not impressed with how he played down the stretch the more that I saw of him. At 10, the Jets, a wide receiver, but not the wide receiver they took. Mel had them taking Drake London.
They took Garrett Wilson.
The Washington Commanders, according to Mel Kiper, should have taken Chris Olave. They took.
Wait, the Commanders, he had the Commanders at 11?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, Washington traded that pick to New Orleans. New Orleans did take Chris Olave. So how do we judge that?
I think that's a win for Kiper.
Okay, we'll call it a win for Kuiper.
Well, let me see who he had taking for New Orleans. Because if it's a wide receiver, I think we give that to Mel.
New Orleans took Chris Olave.
Right, but
Right.
I'm looking who he had New Orleans selecting. Do you know where New Orleans? Okay. Oh, he had New Orleans taking Kenny Pickett, which would have made sense. And, by the way, is right around where Kenny Pickett went. Kenny Pickett went one pick later to the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Who do you have going 12th?
So Mel has, I got to scroll back up. I'm sorry. It's not good radio.
Detroit Lions.
Well, this is the Minnesota Vikings.
Oh, that's right. They got that pick from the Vikings. Who'd they have? Did they have the Vikings taking a receiver?
No, Kayvon Thibodeau.
Lions took Jamison Williams after trading up to 12.
People are commenting, Kiper isn't good. Mel Kiper is an idiot. No, if you judge, this is why I don't think it's fair to Mel. Like is Mel not the most famous mock draft guy?
Yes, I think he is like
Mel is the inventor.
The original, yes.
So like Mel gets a lot of heat for being the first out here. Mel still clearly talks to a lot of people in the NFL.
The point of this is not to dunk all over Mel Kiper. The point of this is to show that we don't know anything.
Also, Eric White, I see, I often don't have time to read these comments ahead of time before I just Ron Burgundy them into the microphone. Eric White says, "Hey Buck, Lucas said he wants to go to the morning show. Are you Austin Eckler-ing me? Are you asking for a trade? Are you demanding your release?
No,
what happened?
I did join the morning show this week or this morning.
Do we have something we need to talk about? Or do we have to wait for Coach Mack? Coach Mack typically officiates our therapy session.
Yeah, we'll wait on Coach Mack.
Okay.
All right, who do you have with the 13th pick?
Houston Texans selecting Kyle Hamilton, the safety from Notre Dame.
That pick went to Cleveland and then went to Houston. And no, my bad. Went from Houston to Cleveland to Philly, and the Eagles took Jordan Davis.
Who Mel has with the next pick, but going to the Baltimore Ravens, and the Baltimore Ravens then selected
Kyle Hamilton.
Jamison Williams at 15.
Texans took Kenyon Green.
Saints, Trevor Penning, the tackle from Northern Iowa.
Was traded to Washington, who picked Jahan Dotson.
17, the Chargers, Devin Lloyd, the linebacker from Utah.
Chargers took Zion Johnson, the guard from Boston College.
Eagles via the Saints, Trent McDuffie, the corner from Washington.
What happened to the number 18 pick in the 2022 NFL Draft?
That's right.
Tennessee Titans select Traylon Burks.
I read that with no sense of irony whatsoever. I forgot all about that. We were talking about this last night or yesterday afternoon because the A to Z Sports guys were asking me, what my availability might be to do some draft stuff with them because I know we're going to have Titans radio on the air here. And we were just talking about, like different plans and strategies as to how long to do a live streaming show. Well, if we did it last year, we could have stayed on for 3 straight hours because they traded A.J. Brown in the middle of the first round. Most first rounds typically aren't like that, although 2 wide receivers were traded last year in the first round. A.J. was the first traded, right? Hollywood Brown went later?
I believe so.
So 19, the New Orleans Saints, who Lucas said traded that pick, he has Kenny Pickett.
Saints took Trevor Penning at 19.
The Steelers took a quarterback at 20. Mel had them taking Malik Willis.
Of course, they took Kenny Pickett.
So Mel had Malik Willis as a first-round quarterback, and Malik fell to the 3rd. Was Malik the biggest, outlier that we had in the first round? Because I don't remember Desmond Ridder being talked about as a first-round quarterback.
No, he wasn't. So what you're saying was Malik, what the experts most got wrong?
Did we most get Malik Willis wrong, collectively as an NFL media conglomerate?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, he was generally thought of as a first-round pick.
That's why I'm always interested to, because I talked to Coach Mack, obviously. I talked to other NFL coaches. I talked to people who work in our business, both on the analyst side of things and former players. And the biggest disconnect that I find in terms of how people talk about the draft versus how football people plan around the draft, it's one of the biggest disconnects, I think, between football media and actual football people. Because Malik is something that the league looked around and told you, nah, man, we're good. We're good until at least it doesn't matter whether we take a quarterback or not. And the Titans ultimately saw an opportunity to trade up and get him because he was falling. He was their second of the 2 third-round picks that they had. But yeah, I think the more that you go back and look at these things in retrospect, I mean, we'll do McShay's here in a second. Malik Willis is probably the thing that NFL draft analysts got the most wrong.
Yeah.
21, Patriots, Daxton Hill, the safety from Michigan.
Chiefs got that pick from the Patriots. They picked cornerback Trent McDuffie from Washington.
Are you just quick on the sound trigger back there? Or just not going to let me? Are you just doing this for sport at this point?
The latter.
Okay, very good. Green Bay Packers, Kenyon Green.
You beat me. Packers pick Quay Walker.
How are we doing for Mel so far?
Really bad. Keep going.
Cardinals Zion Johnson.
That was traded and then ended up with the Bills taking Kyer Elam from Florida, the cornerback.
Did he play much this year?
Don't remember him being a big factor last season.
I don't know if he was injured or not. I can't speak intelligently to that. Dallas Cowboys 24, Tyler Smith.
Oh, wait, no. Sorry, Mel. Yeah, they took Tyler Smith.
You are just too quick on that damn trigger. You're not doing this for comedy at all.
Yeah, I'm
You're
drunk
bad
on
at
power.
this.
Yeah.
All right, so you said that, well, he does have the Bills taking Kyer Elam with their 25th pick had they stuck. Do we give that to Mel?
Yeah, all right. We'll give it to Mel.
Okay.
I'll mark off the X that I put down for that one.
Titans 26 had they stuck and picked. He did have them taking a wide receiver, but it was Jahan Dotson.
The Jets ended up with the 26th pick, drafting Jermaine Johnson out of Florida State.
Bucks, Devontae Wyatt, the DT from Georgia.
Traded to Jacksonville, who picked Devin Lloyd, linebacker out of Utah.
Packers, Christian Watson, wide receiver, North Dakota State.
Packers picked Devontae Wyatt with that 28th pick.
When did they get Watson?
34, second round.
Oh. Chiefs from the Dolphins and also from the 49ers, Sky Moore.
With the 29th pick, the Patriots ended up with it, and they took Cole Strange.
Chiefs at 30, Arnold Ebiketie.
George Karlaftis.
Okay, so a defensive end, but not the right one. 31, Cincinnati Bengals, Karlaftis.
Safety Daxton Hill out of Michigan.
Lions 32, Lewis Seen, the safety out of Georgia.
Well, Lewis Seen did get taken with the 32nd pick, so we'll give that to Mel.
Okay.
But it was to the Vikings.
So what is Mel's final hit percentage?
He missed 14.
So he missed 14 of the 32.
Yes.
That is that's honestly a lot better than I thought those things might go.
56% correct in the first round.
That above average, I got to give it to Mel there. For all of you guys who are screaming Mel Kiper sucks. Now, we did give him a couple because Mel didn't account for trades in his last mock draft, and there's just no possible way that you can accurately predict those kind of things. So we gave Mel a couple. How many did we give Mel? Like, how many were toss-ups that we decided to give him?
Two, where he predicted the right player at that spot, or he predicted the right team to take the correct player just at a different spot. There were 18 trades in the first round last year.
So I don't think we need to do this with McShay. I think Kiper is good enough. But Kiper is one of the better ones, right? 56% on a mock draft.
That's not bad.
That's great. I think you, in most years, you would see people hit on less than 10 picks. Just because there's so many different factors that you cannot account for.
I love how the chat has so quickly turned.
Oh, you flip-floppers.
I was full of Mel Kiper, such
Mel
an idiot.
Kiper
Why are you going?
stinks.
He doesn't know what he's talking about.
TUD, that's a pretty good percentage.
Shane says, wow, 56%. Good job, Mel, with the
All
clapping emoji.
I see you people. You bandwagoners.
Someone said he does a million mocks. One of them is bound to hit.
That's pretty funny.
That's funny.
Okay, let's do, I don't know if there's going to be any comedy to be found in the SEC stat of the day, but we will do that coming up next. A quick reminder, though, that the 82nd running of the Iroquois steeplechase is right around the corner. It's Saturday, May the 13th. I'm hosting. Lucas, have I peer pressured you into coming yet?
I will be on the call for a Nashville Soccer Club game that night, but I suppose I'll be available that day.
Oh, that wouldn't give you anxiety? That would give me anxiety.
Well, I'm not going to go get drunk with you at steeplechase before I have to call a game.
I mean, okay.
But I'll come check it out.
That would seem problematic. Good that you're not admitting to that on the air. But yes, the 82nd running of the Iroquois steeplechase. I don't know if Lucas will be there. He might be, but I will be there. I'll be hosting, and it'll be a great time. It'll be a lot of fun with a lot of cool people. It makes tailgating a breeze. You can purchase tickets to join us inside the all-inclusive Champions Corner thanks to Uncle Bud's and O'Charlie's. It's the 82nd running of the Iroquois steeplechase presented by Bank of America. For more info or to purchase tickets, visit 1045thezone.com.
What time does steeplechase typically take place?
Oh, my God, Lucas, what is 14 divided by 32?
Well, he got 14 wrong. He didn't get 14 right.
You're being accused of not doing the math correctly.
If he got 14 picks wrong, that means he got...
Are you confident in your math of 56%? Because I didn't challenge you. I took your word, and I
If he
shouldn't
got
have.
14 picks wrong, that means he got 18 picks right, which would mean he got 56% of his picks right.
You feel good about that?
No.
Well, we'll see if he feels any better about the stat of the day coming up next. Friday at 10:45, we've got the SEC stat of the day. There's not a lot going on in college football. College basketball officially over. Champions crowned on Sunday and Monday, respectively. So I don't know. There can't be more annoying music back there. God knows what Lucas Panziga has prepared.
I got nothing.
Okay, good.
Because the SEC stat of the day heads to the baseball diamond, as we are at about the halfway point in the college baseball season, and the stat of the day today is the number 10, because Vanderbilt, with a win over Missouri last night, game 1 of the series in Columbia, is 10-0 in SEC play for the first time in program history. Tennessee made some history of its own last season, starting the year 9-0 before their first conference loss. Vanderbilt has officially one-upped that, as the Vandy boys are unblemished in conference play.
That's fantastic. Now, Tennessee is not.
No, Tennessee fell 6-1 at home against second-ranked Florida last night. So the Vols, have struggled against some of the best competition they've played. They lost their series against LSU last weekend. They're down a game in the series against Florida. They got to go again. They're in Knoxville tonight and then again on Saturday. They were swept to open up against Missouri, the team that Vanderbilt beat last night. And Tennessee was able to get right, and they were able to beat Texas A&M and sweep them a couple of weeks ago. But, yeah, they're 4 wins from conference play right now. Tennessee come from the sweep of A&M and the 1 win they got against LSU to avoid getting swept at the number 1 Tigers.
They can't put the ball in play. Like, it's crazy. They struck out a season high last night 18 times. It tied a program record. They were 2 of 23 with runners on base against Florida. They just don't look, I don't know how else to quantify it, but they don't look right. So this is, college baseball is a little different, I think, in terms of interest. I do think that Major League Baseball allegiances outweigh largely people's interest in college baseball until we get closer to Omaha, right? Like, I think that's what sucks up most of the attention during the baseball season.
Yeah.
Unless you've got something overwhelming, at least here locally, like we did with previous Tennessee teams and Vandy. Not in the last couple of years. Tennessee has dominated more of the storylines. They're just a little more flashy, a little more in your face with it, I think is a great way to describe it. So they've been a bigger point of discussion. But for, like we talked about being casually checking in on hockey from time to time, like just to kind of look in on what that series was and what I kind of have in my head as the idea of Tennessee baseball, having not seen a ton of them this season and then seeing the results from last night, it's kind of like, that seems weird.
Yeah, they definitely don't have as much firepower across the lineup this season. And a lot of that attitude is a little more subdued when you're not winning, right? I mean, they got off to such a dominant start in SEC play. I mean, I think it was the first series of conference play last season that they went to Ole Miss and put up like 20 or more runs in every game against the eventual national champions. They were just riding so high early on and had one of the best regular seasons the sport has ever seen. So I guess the hope for Tennessee fans is that this year is kind of the inverse of that, because last year was such a fun run throughout the course of the regular season, winning the SEC championship, kind of getting to the super regional, and then the disappointment of not even getting to Omaha. So now you hope, if you're a Vols fan, that it's the inverse, that the regular season won't be as dominant, but they kind of hit their groove at the right time, and they're able to get back to Omaha like they did 2 years ago and maybe get something more out of it, maybe get a national championship for the first time in program history. But yeah, the start has not been as inspiring, which is probably why they're not making as many headlines.
So we'll see what happens with Tennessee. We'll at some point try and get a hold of Tony Vitello. We haven't talked to Tony in a while, and he's always I think he's always forthright. Now, it's been a lot easier to be upfront and honest and enjoying these media interactions when his team has been the talk of the sport and one of the most dominant things that we've seen in college baseball in the last couple of years. So I'd be curious to get an honest assessment from him at some point if they continue to kind of gut it out. Now, they're still a top 15 team. They're the 11th team. They're ranked 11 in the country right now, last I checked. So it's not like they're, mired in mediocrity. It's not like the bottom's falling out. They're just going through a little more struggles than I think we're accustomed to seeing, or at least we've become accustomed to seeing in the last couple of seasons.
Yeah.
I'm excited to get back into baseball, though.
Tennessee will play Vanderbilt in Knoxville. So they will meet in Knoxville. It's their only series of the regular season coming up in 2 weeks. So Vanderbilt will play South Carolina next weekend, and they'll go to Lindsey Nelson Stadium for a 3-game series 2 weeks from now.
We're going to talk to Coach Mack at 11:20. I'm going to focus in on wide receivers with Mack today because I was doing a bit on primetime last night about the ideal fix that I had for the Titans wide receiver room. But of course, one of those moves would require DeAndre Hopkins to get cut. He's just still hanging out there in Arizona. So we'll talk to Mack about some of these prospects in this draft and what beyond the first round, because I feel like Jackson Smith and Jigba has sucked up single-handedly so much of the wide receiver discussion around the Titans that at some point I think it's worth looking at some of the guys in the second and third rounds because they can still help your football team. But first, we're going to talk to Alex Daugherty of A to Z Sports. Preds 1 point back of the Flames and the Jets for the second wild card spot in these Stanley Cup playoffs. We'll talk to Alex about what he's observed from this young Preds team and whether he thinks they can finish the job and make the postseason for the 9th straight year. I'm Buck Rising. It's 104.5 The Zone.
It is 10:59 a.m. Good morning from the Superbook.com Sports Desk. I'm Lucas Panzica, starting with the Seymour Putters Masters update. Second round is underway, and Brooks Koepka has extended his lead. 11 under through 13 holes. Tied for second at 7 under are Jason Day, Victor Hovland, and John Rahm. Hovland and Rahm yet to tee off. For Hovland, it'll be 1 hour from now. Rahm will tee off at 12:18. Tiger at 2 under. He will tee off close to noon. The Nashville Predators are inching closer to that playoff line. Last night, it was a 3-0 win over the Carolina Hurricanes. That pulled the Preds within 1 point of the final playoff spot in the West. 4 games left in the regular season. The next 2 are against the 2 teams that stand between the Preds and a playoff berth, the Jets and the Flames. Tomorrow night, a road trip to Winnipeg to play the Jets with a 6 p.m. puck drop. For all your foundation repair and waterproofing needs, visit USSTN.com. Breaking news at once in your home for the Titans and Vols. This is 104.5 The Zone.
Second hour on this Friday. Lovely to have you here. Thanks for hanging out with us on 104.5 The Zone. Lucas and I with you until 1 o'clock today. Jump in if you like. 615-737-1045 is the number. Coach Mack will be here in 20 minutes. We'll talk some wide receiver prospects in this year's draft class and discuss the idea of approaching a veteran player about trading them and ultimately releasing them. The difficulty, the balance that you have to find, because you may end up in a situation where you have to keep certain players on your roster if you try to move them to no avail during the offseason. I'm sure Mac has experience with that, or at least we'll ask him about that at 11:20. Meanwhile, we've been keeping an eye or paying closer attention than we typically have been to the Nashville Predators. A 3-0 win at home last night over the Carolina Hurricanes. In a big spot. It gets them 1 point within the Jets and Flames of the second wild card spot in the Western Conference at 40-30-8. So Alex Daugherty of A to Z Sports is going to jump on with us and kind of give us his assessment. He covers this team, and it's been a while since we've checked in on them. In fact, there was a lot of different jerseys or a lot of different names on the back of jerseys or sweaters when last we talked to Alex, given the amount of injuries and kind of selling of parts that this team has done in the last few months. And what it means. Basically, there's so many questions around the Preds right now, just as far as what is going to be their philosophical approach to the future. What does this mean for John Hines as a coach? Does it matter if they make the playoffs or not? Depending on how Barry Trotz evaluates this roster now that David Poile has shifted into a different role. Meanwhile, Alex is here to talk about all these things. Hey, buddy.
Hey, what's going on? How are you?
I'm great. We were just talking about how bad a job I do at calling you until something interesting is happening with the hockey team.
That's okay. That's all right. I don't fault you for that. It's okay, Buck.
Okay.
I'm fine.
As long as we're good. So what the hell? There's a bunch of different dudes out there that I'm used to seeing. If people have just now checked back into the Preds, kind of talk, or I don't want to ask you a talk about question. That just felt bad coming out of my mouth. But basically, what the hell has happened in the last couple of months with this team since they made the change from David Poile in his role as general manager to officially kind of this transition under Barry Trotz?
Well, yeah, there's definitely a lot that's happened. I think the biggest key is sort of the takeaway that I would think anyone who hasn't watched this team every day this year, like I have, I think the biggest takeaway is you've gone from a roster filled with guys who've already signed their contracts, who are on the other side of 30, and are established veterans. Not saying that they're not playing hard. I really don't think that's the case, but they are definitely differently motivated than the current roster. I mean, you've gone from a bunch of 30-year-olds and on to a bunch of 21, 22, 23, 24, 25-year-olds who are trying to make it in the league, who are, as John Hines has said multiple times, hungry and ready to prove that they belong. And they're not perfect. I mean, they the team is not like running away with things. I think they're like, since the deadline, they are like 10-7 or something like that. I mean, they're certainly not like setting the world on fire, but they're making mistakes, but they're also doing some pretty good things. And guys like Tommy Novak and Philip Tomasino and Luke Evangelista, these are the players that are leading this team right now, while Philip Forsberg and Matt Duchene and Ryan Johansson and Roman Josi are all injured. And obviously the other players that are no longer here anymore, Matthias Ekholm, Tanner Jeannot, Mikhail Granlund. So it's just, I mean, I can't tell you how different the locker room is right now. I mean, like the most veteran player in that locker room is Colton Sissons. And I mean, in terms of Nashville veterans, I mean, obviously Brian McDonough is the most veteran, but he's only been here this year. So Colton Sissons is the guy that knows the most everything about that locker room, and he's only 29 years old. I mean, it's a very different place, and I know you mentioned the GM change. There is definitely something to that, but I really think it's more about the injuries and like the fact that they had to call some of these guys up for injury, and they are playing great.
Well, and I guess it took extreme measures to get there, and I don't know whether this is a better version of the Predators right now than it had been, this inconsistent one, or at least it's seemingly inconsistent. Like you said, you watch them every day, and I check in from time to time, so I don't want to make any unfair assessments of them. But it seems like their hand has been forced in this particular situation to play a lot of these young guys. How vindicating can that be for David Poile, given the situation that he is getting ready to go through?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably it's sort of like, you know, like when an outfielder in baseball overruns the ball and then makes a diving catch to get it, and everyone thinks, oh, what a great play. Well, if you hadn't overrun the ball, maybe you wouldn't have had to make that great play.
Right.
It's kind of like that. It's kind of like that with David Poile. He signed some bad contracts and got out of them, and now it's like, I mean, obviously some of those trades were just unbelievable. The Tanner Jeannot trade, I think we talked about it, was just crazy good for Nashville. So there's some really great moves by him, but I really do think that the injuries necessitated most of what you're seeing now. I mean, like, if Forsberg, Duchene, and Johansson, those three in particular, are not injured, we do not see Luke Evangelista, Philip Tomasino, and probably not even Tommy Novak to the extent we're seeing him now, playing such big minutes right now. I mean, we just don't see it. I think that they might make appearances, they might have a role, but they're not trying to lead the team right now. So that's really the bigger issue, I think. And then the other thing is, we don't know to what extent Barry Trotz is involved in these moves and David Poile is involved in these moves, and we don't know how much John Hines is involved. So, like, I know that's probably a burning question for a lot of people. What's this going to say about John Hines, which we can talk about. But the Poile thing, I think he's gotten a little lucky with some of the moves he's made, but also you got to give him credit for getting what he can out of some of those trades.
Okay, so let's go right to that question then. What does this mean for John Hines? Is there any meaning to take from John Hines, or is it still so much up in the air because of the parts that he's working with?
I'll just say it right now. I think he's back next year. Okay. I think John Hines is back next year. I don't really think it's going to be an issue, actually. I kind of thought that he would be back next year prior to all this. I really do. I mean, and only because the situation that they're in is not like, you know, this is not a Stanley Cup contending team. It's not really the playoff team. They might make the playoffs, but you know, that's not what they are. That's not what they're going to be next year, even. And he's got 1 year left on his contract. I just think that they probably would let him play that out. And Trotz, it's not like I don't see him as the guy that's going to come in and make a ton of changes. I mean, he didn't suggest that to me. I think he's probably going to you know, maybe 5 years down the road. 5 years down the road, what kind of coach do I want to have in place? But I think John Hines is back next year, and I do think that the biggest thing for him in his corner is that all these young guys are playing their hearts out for him, and they're playing their hearts out for Nashville, and they're doing a pretty good job at it. And, man, if they make the playoffs, it would just be huge for those young players.
So where have you seen the most growth? Because that, I think, you know, I talked about this to open the show, Alex, like the idea of, like, learning how to win as a team. It's difficult to kind of quantify something like that, but at least there seems to me in the last couple of weeks at any case, to be tangible evidence of this team figuring out how to close games out at the end. And obviously a great result last night with a big performance by UC Saros in net for them to get the shutout.
Yeah, okay, so the biggest growth I would say just is in their bounce back ability. Like they had some bad losses. I mean, this team we're talking about right now, not earlier in the season, but this team right now had some real bad losses. The 7-2 loss to Seattle, the 5-1 loss to Dallas. There was a loss to Chicago in there somewhere. I mean, there were some real bad losses, but they bounced back, and I just feel like that is pretty important for a young group to try to do. I mean, like for guys like Cody Glass who just have been on the league in the league for just 100 games or so, to be able to bounce back and then go get some big wins over teams like Buffalo and then Seattle as well, and Boston. That game was huge last night against Carolina. Like that's I think the bigger issue. We could talk tactically. I think that they've really figured some stuff out defensively. I know that last night they were kind of overrun by Carolina's attack, but I will say this: like Carolina didn't get a ton of quality. They got a lot of volume, but they didn't get a ton of quality. UC Saros made a lot of really good saves, but he didn't have to make the same amount of saves he's had to make in the past, where you're just like, I don't understand how this guy's even there. I think that they've figured out some things defensively. They're starting to find some offense here and there. They need to improve their power play. Their penalty kill has been excellent since January 1st. They're like the third best penalty kill in the league. So they've figured out some things, but I do think that mentally being able to bounce back from bad losses is the biggest improvement from this team earlier in the year.
Alex Daugherty of A to Z Sports is here with us. Preds 1 point back right now of the Jets and Flames for the second wild card spot in the Western Conference, trying to keep this playoff streak of make these 8 consecutive, potentially 9 consecutive seasons of making the playoffs, trying to keep that streak alive. So they've got the toughest schedule remaining in the NHL. They get a big win last night that does them a great deal of good. What percentage chance would you put on them getting into this for the second wild card spot? Because, I mean, the Jets and Flames, 2 teams who they still have on the schedule, this is not an easy situation that they have to try and overcome.
Yeah, no, it's not. I think Money Puck has their Money Puck's a really good site for this for these odds kind of thing. So Money Puck puts their odds at 10.5% right now to make the playoffs, which, if you think about it, is pretty crazy low, considering they're only 1 point behind the Jets. They're 1 point behind the Jets, and their chances are still only 10%. That tells you a lot about what they think about the Nashville's chances of winning all these games they have remaining, because they've got, I mean, the schedule is just crazy. I mean, they got Winnipeg, Calgary, Minnesota, Colorado, all 4 playoff teams, all teams you've lost to already this year, and tough teams to play, a couple of them on the road. So I would say 10% is probably actually kind of generous.
Sure.
I would put it at like maybe 5% chance of making the playoffs. But at this point, just go for it. I mean, why not? Win only 4 games and see what happens, and see if you can get in the playoffs.
Is it beneficial to these young players that this is the kind of task that they're going to have to overcome, whether they're successful or not? How much do you think we can learn about these current prospects, or I guess they're not prospects because they're playing right now, but this group of guys, given the difficulty that's in front of them?
Yeah, it's pretty much house money at this point. I do like the idea of some of these young guys getting playoff experience now. I would caution people to think too much of that. I mean, I think that there's a step in the playoffs that happens that you do need to be able to see in order to really understand how intense it is. I mean, some of these guys have never seen that. A couple of guys have seen it. But let's just think about the other players on the team that have been there before. I mean, UC Saros knows what the playoffs are. Is it going to help him to have to play like that, behind a team that's so young? Probably too. I mean, I don't think there's anything that says it's just the young guys that are going to benefit. I think that even a Ryan McDonough or a Tyson Berry or a UC Saros could benefit from seeing what these younger guys can do and going into next year thinking, okay, we get a couple small pieces, we can build on this, and I know the guys in front of me have learned a little bit, and we'll see what we can do. So I think it's valuable for everyone in that locker room, not just the young guys, but everyone.
What do you have up, or what are you working on for A2Zsports.com right now?
This week, I just trying to figure out where these things are going. I'm trying to work on a playoff, breakdown. What could actually happen, but it changes every day, so it's a little hard to figure that out. But keep your eye out. There'll be something coming soon. I can assure you that, related to the playoffs.
At Alex Daugherty 1 is where you can follow him to make sure that you're keeping updated with all his great coverage. Thanks for hanging out, buddy. I appreciate it.
Of course, anytime. Talk to you guys later.
That's Alex Daugherty talking about these Preds who are trying their best to keep this club's franchise or this club's playoff streak alive. We'll see. Should be fun. Coach Mack talking wide receivers coming up next. Love a Friday at 11:20. That music means Coach Dave McGinnis of Titans Radio is here, presented by Farm Bureau Health Plans, and that means it's time to talk some ball. We're going to do that here in just a second. Mac, though, I was in the middle of doing a live read for one of our great partners here on the show, and the audience didn't hear it because Lucas got to it in time. He dumped it because I, in the middle of trying to articulate, did not do so very well. And may have said a bad word that he had to drop. Has that ever happened to you in the middle of a game?
Yeah, but I think that they were worried about it happening more when I first started. Mike Keith had a baseball bat up there that he had in his hand when I first started to reach over there and hit me and remind me that I wasn't in a coaching booth anymore. But not anything really bad, no. But it's something you've got to be aware of.
Yes, hell yes.
Well, that's organic. Don't cut Mac off the way you cut me off with that audio back there. Shame on you, Lucas.
Anyway, but you're enough of a professional, Buck. I'm sure you overcame it pretty well.
Yeah, well, we finished strong, I think. But Lucas, thank God, it's one of the few times I've been grateful for him back there. Dove across the thing to make sure that didn't get out on the air. Either way, was that hard for you, Matt?
Nice save, Lucas.
Yeah, that's good support back there.
Oh, don't speak too soon, Mac. I've got a plan for it.
This is what nobody's safe. It's completely unfair at this point.
Lucas made one of those game-saving saves as a goalie back there. Nice job, Lucas.
Yeah, well, until he turns it into his own game, only for his own selfish purposes. He's going to use it against me in some form or fashion. Later on,
That's the thing that you got to remember. Those guys behind the glass in a studio, they've always got the tape saved.
No question. Was it hard for you? Because, Mac, you came into that job. I remember talking to you about this when you first started doing Titans Radio before we get into some wide receivers with you. Was that hard for you to kind of like, I don't know. I don't want to say that necessarily you come with a certain kind of polish anyway, but that's a much different environment to watch a game and to experience all the different emotions of a game in a way that you may not necessarily have had the proper protocol prior to stepping into that booth.
Well, and that's the first thing they wanted. And I told them, look, if I do this, I'm going to prepare for games just like I did when I was coaching. And then, I want to be emotional about it because it is emotional, but I want to be genuine. I don't want to manufacture anything. But the thing that, as being a head coach in the league, I'd done a lot of media, Buck, and I had my own television show, for 4 years there, there at Arizona, and I'd had my own radio show, so I'd done a lot of that stuff. Now in a ball game, it's different, and me, I mean, I was very, very fortunate. I remember talking with, Tony Romo did his first game with Jim Nance here, in Tennessee, his real game, and I remember talking to him before the ball game, and he said, "How do you like doing what you're doing, Coach Mack?" I said, "Look," I came into this thing, I love ball, and I know what's going on down there, but the intricacies of doing, professional radio." I said, "My savior was how good Titans radio personnel are. I mean, the production crew, Brad Willis and Philip Noel, are outstanding. Rhett Bryan is just the top of the list, and then the first thing is, and I told Romo this, I said, look, I'm so fortunate. I got a Hall of Fame guy that's sitting there, guiding me through all of it and just, pitching things to me. And I said, it's really smooth, with Mike Keith. You got Jim Nance. I said, so how lucky are we? So anyway, look, the Titans radio crew, as you well know, because you're close with it, Lucas is up there now in the booth with us, doing his updates. It's a professional outfit up there. And so, they brought me in, and I remember Brad Willis when we were up the Jets. It was the first game that I did as a preseason game. I'd only been there 2 days, and he said, "Look, I'll tell you, through the quarters how it's going, and you can either take it or leave it." And I said, "That's fine." I said, "I'm good either way." And so told me to take my headset off at that first quarter, and I went, "All right, here it comes." He said, "Mac, please don't ever do anything different." So I have.
Yeah, you don't jack with the good stuff. Coach Dave McGinnis of Titans Radio here with us on 104.5 The Zone. It really is the only time of my week where I feel like I have to act like a professional because it's such a buttoned-up operation every time me and Jimmy are in that booth. It's only about 10 minutes, but like it's got to be the best 10 minutes because I know that I want to bog the proceedings down around there. Mac,
Well, you guys add a lot to it. I mean, it's very well orchestrated and scripted. I mean, Rhett and I and Amy Wells and Mike Keith, we work, just like putting a game plan together, for that broadcast. And, the prior week, I mean, there's a lot of film study that goes into it. And, of course, Mike Keith is organized to the T. Rhett Bryan is up there running it. I mean, it takes a lot to put that on. I mean, look, I knew I was with a good group when we were able to, to put on a broadcast in Wembley Stadium when we were out in the stadium. I watched those guys stretch cable forever and ever and ever, and I'm going, how in the hell are we going to do this? They made it work.
He's Coach Dave McGinnis of Titans Radio. He's presented by Farm Bureau Health Plans, like an extra set of pads. They've been protecting Tennesseans for 75 years. They are the best in the business at Farm Bureau Health Plans. So, Mac, we haven't talked about wide receivers with you yet. And a lot of attention, obviously, with the situation that the Titans have in the wide receiver room. A lot of youth. They bring back NWI, but could certainly still use an influx of talent and speed at this stage. There's a lot of interesting wide receiver prospects, maybe not necessarily the domination of the drafts that we've seen wide receivers have at the top of things in the last couple of years, but still a lot of functional players that are going to make a lot of sense for teams in this year's class.
No, I think that's fair, Buck. I think you've got a right assessment of it. Rhett and I are to the point now, after, several months that we're going to start our first potting and putting together vertical and horizontal board next week after we do a function for the Boy Scouts down there in Columbia. So we're at that point now, and you've got to go in segments when you're putting a draft board together, and that's the segment we're in now. I think your assessment of what the wide receiver crop is this year is very, very fair, and I think you're very spot on with it. You're going to have to pick and choose. As you said, there's not those big dominant receivers that there have been in the past, but there's some very, very good functional receivers they're going to be taken in this draft. And when the run starts with them, our listeners are savvy enough to know there are runs that happen in the National Football League. That's why the pods that you put together when you put together a real vertical and horizontal draft board are so important, because now you don't start just targeting individuals. You start targeting bullpens full of people, depending on where your picks are. And, what were there? How many trades were there in the first round last year? I mean, there was a lot of trades last year in the first round. It was double digits. So it's hard to determine what's really going to happen. But that being said, these receivers, you've got some different blends of them. I mean, you got the Quentin Johnson at TCU that's a bigger receiver. When I do these shows on my segments with 104.5, I read right out of my film notebook. I've got 37 of them. This is the 37th I've done when I'm watching film and tape on people. Quentin Johnson, burst and acceleration, good blend of size and speed, productive, needs work on press release, needs to sink his hips a little bit better than his brakes. Catchable balls dropped, observed in film's view. Big upside as a receiver because of size and speed, one of the few bigger receivers in this league. You got Jordan Addison at Southern Cal, who's smaller, 6 foot 175, quick, good hands, run after catch, really good. Slot, excellent agility, space player, terrific spatial awareness and body control. You have more quick than fast, and in physicality, you got a question mark. Jackson Smith and Jigba from Ohio State, excellent route runner, I wrote here, has separation skills, body control, 2022 injuries, soft tissue, hamstring, football IQ very high. Looks like he has spatial awareness, ball skills, strong at catch point, smooth technique-wise. 1 season of college production. To me, I put immediate starter as a slot receiver in the National Football League. I mean, that's 3 guys that are completely different body types, but they show you the span of receivers that are in this league. And I can go through any one of them you want me to, but your assessment is correct.
Well, let me circle back to Jackson Smith and Jigba, just because obviously the Titans had a large contingent at the Ohio State Pro Day. We know Mike Vrabel's connections there, obviously, and the need at wide receiver. Glaring is probably too strong a word, given the players that we know they have that we haven't quite seen enough of yet. A lot of young dudes at this point. But with him, Mac, he's played primarily in the slot. I look at him the way that I remember watching A.J. Brown as a big slot at Ole Miss, and thinking and seeing a lot of discussion around, okay, can a player like that translate as an outside receiver and also play on the inside to give you more options as far as what you're able to do with the personnel when they're out on the field? When you're evaluating that, how do I guess do you go about trying to see if the skill set of a player translates to what they might be asked to do in the league beyond what they've been asked to do in college?
No, absolutely. Yes, he can. I mean, look, I'm fortunate in doing this, and that's why I love being able to, do this with our listeners, and also, in the broadcast. I mean, I've got 37 years of a lot of experience in this. I drafted Anquan Bolden, right, in the second-round pick, coming out. Had played some quarterback there at Florida State. People were questioning his speed, but when he got to play receiver, he played both inside and outside. He, drafted him, and he played both. He was very much the same as this guy, except Jackson Smith-Njigba has got more foot speed. He's got more straight-ahead foot speed. But could he be out? Absolutely. And here's the reason why. First of all, it's all about separation quickness, and it's about the ability to separate within the transfer point of where the quarterback's release point is going to be, on most routes. And Anquan had an innate skill for that, plus strong at the catch point. This guy's the same way. So, when you start talking about can somebody go inside or outside, absolutely it can, and especially with all the formational things that you can do offensively, especially with two-man stacks and also 9-ball stacks, where you can put him in that triangle out there. He absolutely can. I mean, I like this receiver. If you're asking me about him, just Coach Mack, do you like him or not? I think he's going to be an immediate starter in the league. Now, you're talking about hamstring injury that kept him out of a big part of what's going on at Ohio State last year. But if you want to just go purely on what his skill set is, I will go on record as saying I think he'll be a first-year starter wherever he goes, and you can use him in multiple spots.
It's certainly going to be a balance for a team like this one where availability is it's at a premium everywhere in the league, but we know obviously this team struggles with availability in the last couple of years, so that will be a decision that they'll have to make. Cedric Tillman and Jalen Hyatt, Mac, they could go. Hyatt, it seems like, might be borderline first round. As you mentioned, the runs, we'll see where they happen and how that affects each of these respective positions. But these are, again, two different players as far as their skill sets are concerned. We know I don't want to necessarily call it a criticism, or at least just the spectrum that people are viewing a lot of these Tennessee offensive prospects through, is that the offense does not necessarily translate to what they'll be asked to do in the NFL. But the production from those two players at their best, understanding that Tillman missed a lot of time last year with injury, what we've seen from them is a sample size in the different ways that they can win. I think that they're as intriguing as any player in this draft.
No, absolutely. And look, skill sets need to be – every player that comes into this league, I don't care where they play, what system they play in collegiate football, has got to be developed in the National Football League. That's why you pay these coaches a lot of money. I mean, I was one for 31 years. They paid me a lot of money to be able to develop players. Titans have got one of the best wide receiver coaches in the league here in Rob Moore. You develop players. And so what you look at is, do they have the innate skills to be developed? Both of these guys do. Both of their skills are different. Jalen Hyatt, you got a guy that's got, that's a speed guy, that is a take the top off guy, that you're going to have to teach to release and do some other thing. But he clearly has proven that he's very coachable, extremely coachable. And so, but he is different. Cedric Tillman has shown you what he will do in this league. You got a 6'3", 215-pound player, and I'm going to his write-up right now as far as I'm looking at just film study. Combat catcher, exceptional body control. He's got excellent ball skill. His hands and spatial awareness. He is a physical player. Now, he had an ankle injury, in 2022, but Cedric Tillman has shown you what he is going to do in this league. And he's not going to be a guy that and people start talking about speed. I mean, speed is relevant as far as you got to get open and catch the ball first. You can be as fast as you want to be. If you can't release and you can't get open and you can't catch, then speed really doesn't do you much good, all right? This guy right here has shown you what he will be in the National Football League. I like both of these players, but you said it, Buck, and you're right. Their skill sets are completely different, but they both can be developed. There's nobody that comes into this league, at any position. We can just go through them, but we're talking receivers now. You got to develop these guys because it's a different world they're coming into.
Coach Dave McGinnis of Titans Radio here with us on 104.5 The Zone.
Coach, Buck and I have been talking a lot about Hendon Hooker's age and how that might work against him throughout this draft process compared to an Anthony Richardson who's only 20 and still has a long way to go developmentally. How much can that work against guys, especially at the quarterback position? Is that dependent on coaches and general managers that view that differently? Because I've had a hard time looking at Hendon Hooker's age as being a really big factor as far as why he wouldn't be considered a first-round pick. If there's other factors, that's fine. I just have a hard time seeing him being 25 as a big factor in that.
You're 100% right, Lucas. It has no difference, especially as a quarterback. Let's talk about age a minute. Let's go back because, again, as I say, I don't have recency bias in a lot of my stuff. I've got a lot of years to build it on. Remember all the great linemen that came out of BYU and still are. Most of those guys, are of Mormon faith, so they've gone on missions, and so most of those linemen that come out are 24, 25 years old. Mm-hmm. That's how they started building things out there with Lavelle Edwards. Certain positions where you need a little bit more maturity early. I see Hendon Hooker's age being zero factor in how people are going to evaluate him. They're going to evaluate him on what their situation is, how much time that they figure that they can take him to develop him within their system into what they want to do, and then where his knee injury is. But his age, to me, if anything, especially as a quarterback, and guys, this is a different world for quarterbacks in this league now. They can stay healthy longer because you can't do the things to them defensively you used to could. All right. I mean, I can't talk on air about the things we used to do when I first came in the league with the Bears, back there. That's defenses to quarterbacks, how we went after them. You can't do that anymore. So they've got a chance to stay healthier longer. But to me, if anything, I think it might be an advantage just because of the maturity level. There's a big difference, just in human beings from a 21-year-old to a 25-year-old.
Oh, I think you're preaching to the exact correct choir as far as that is concerned. Coach Dave McGinnis of Titans Radio, always good enough to give us some of his time on this Friday and across the station throughout the course of the week. Mac, thank you so much for the time. And again, TennesseeTitans.com for all the great work that the Titans Radio crew is doing. The official Titans podcast also available wherever you get your podcast. Have a great Friday, bud.
Buck, you and Lucas have a great weekend. See you guys.
That's the main man, Mac, with us on 104.5 The Zone. It's just such a great thing to have halfway through the Friday show. He just puts me in a better mood. And also, I feel like I've learned something. Like, I maintain that Mac's segments are some of the most productive things we do throughout the course of any given week. Now, the Masters has certainly been interesting. Drama to start in the first round yesterday. I have not had it on in the studio today. I don't know if we have access to be able to do that, Lucas. I meant to mention that earlier, if possible, so I've been watching it on my laptop. But I have a position on this particular Masters that is different than any way that I felt about this event in years past. We're going to talk about that coming up next. I'm Buck Rising. It's 104.5 The Zone. Is this the Masters theme? This doesn't sound right. Did you pull rights-free music? Is that what this is? Is this knockoff Masters theme?
This is the Masters theme.
Maybe it's just because Jim Nantz isn't soothing me with his dulcet tones. I heard Ron Slay's terrible Jim Nantz impression because they played that Jim Nantz promo, you know. I mean, it's cool. If Jim Nantz is just casually listening to your radio show because he lives in Nashville now, that's awesome.
It's awesome and also scary.
Oh, I hate the idea of the professional broadcaster. Like, professional broadcasting icon. Jim Nantz is out there somewhere. Not today, obviously. He's in Augusta. But is out there somewhere at any given point during the football season and potentially listening to how bad you and I are at this job.
I know. Like,
that makes me very upset.
I love that Jim Nantz listens to the station. But, like, when we have things like...
Jerry Jones might be my daddy, y'all.
Then I don't know. I don't know what.
We spent an
reaction
entire
would be.
20 minutes talking about the promiscuity of Robert's mother
Right.
in a certain time in her life. And that is what led to that sound drop that, you know, we still have out there. It's an open case.
Sometimes we do this show, and I think nobody should be listening to this.
Well, it's funny because I often do the radio show like nobody listens to this, which is probably not a good thing.
Yeah, I don't think this is supposed to be like a dance like no one's watching thing.
Which is exactly how we do it.
That is how we do it.
Might be a problem there.
Do radio like no one's listening. Like, that's not a thing.
Yeah, well, it is now. So speaking of the Masters, okay. Now, what's the latest? Update us on the leaderboard, Lucas. With what's going on in day 2 at Augusta right now. I know that it got contentious is the wrong word, but down to the wire certainly in yesterday's first round.
Oh, yeah. I mean, 4 guys tied at the top after day 1 at 7 under. John Rahm bogeying the first hole and then somehow rallying to be tied at the top of the leaderboard after Thursday. But Brooks Koepka remains in the lead by 3 strokes. He's 12 under, and he's currently on the 18th hole. Jason Day has made his way to sole possession of second at the moment, 9 under through 13. Victor Hovland, John Rahm, both at 7 under. They have yet to tee off. Hovland will tee off here in about 6 minutes.
So the thing that fascinates me about the Masters this year, the most compelling storylines to me, because it's always about, and you know, we think in terms of the show, I think, when it relates to sports or just general things that are going on in our lives, like the dead rat Benji that lives inside of, no longer lives, but is present inside of Lucas's walls.
He visits me in my dreams now.
This is so unpleasant. But, you know, I'm looking for the most interesting thing out of this Masters. And this year it's not Tiger. Now, Tiger being around, Tiger at Augusta, the photo ops, you know, if he makes the cut, whatever the case may be, he's never missed the cut. So that is a compelling story, but that's not the case this year. Rightly or wrongly, whatever your position are, whether you're passionate about it or not, the Live Golf League members who are participating at Augusta this week and how people are now tracking them separately from the PGA Tour players to see whether they've played enough golf leading up to the Masters that would keep them competitive. It looked like mixed results in the first round yesterday. 17 Live Golf League players competed in the first round. Brooks Koepka had a share of the first round lead with a 7 under 65, as Lucas said. You had Cam Smith, who won the Open Championship most recently. He's the reigning champion, 2 under. And you have past Masters champions, Dustin Johnson. You got Phil Mickelson. I had forgotten that Patrick Reed won a Masters.
Mm-hmm.
He is one of the most unlikable characters in all of sports, not just golf. But there's Patrick Reed alongside all these other Live Tour members. And, you know, looking around at how they finished yesterday, just having it being a talking point, I've gone back and forth on this because we had a couple of callers bring up the idea of the hypocrisy of criticizing Live golfers for taking Saudi money. When understandably, you know, anybody who's put on a pair of Nikes or looked at your Apple products, there are conflicts with countries that have less than reputable human rights reputations all over the place because of the way that international commerce works. So it's hard to be hypercritical of the Live golfers for taking the Saudi bag when, you know, most of us use products that we probably shouldn't, but out of the sake of convenience and ease, and because they make our lives substantially easier, We put it in the back of our minds. But the way that it's being covered by media at the Masters is starting to ruffle the feathers of some of the live golfers who are participating this year at Augusta. This was Sergio Garcia when being asked about live golf, about the interactions with PGA players, and everything in between.
Normal did it feel coming back here and playing and just concentrating on your game?
Totally normal.
Yeah.
It's just
That
you guys
good
need to stop it. I mean, you guys are making a big deal out of these, and it's you guys.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. I mean, I've had nothing but great things from every single player that I've talked to. So just please stop it and just talk about the Masters and, you know.
No, I think actually, in defense, I think actually he was thinking it's just you haven't had as many reps as sometimes you normally would. How did you feel playing this golf course because of the
No,
reps you had?
I don't think he meant that, but I did play. I played 1, 2, 3, 4. I played 5 tournaments coming in here, so it's pretty good. I mean, there's been times where I probably maybe even haven't played that much coming into here, but it's usually around that, 4, 5, 6 tournaments. So that wasn't the problem.
Are you aware of the decision that came down today in the UK about?
I'm not.
You're not. Okay.
Sorry.
Does that mean you wouldn't talk about it if we told you what happened?
Well, how can I talk about something that I don't know? Obviously, I don't look at the news, so I don't know. I don't know what happened, and I'm not going to talk about something without all the information that I need. I don't want to get into
Let me just ask you one other thing then.
a dangerous spot.
Are you interested in playing in any event on the European Tour going forward?
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. We'll see how the year goes.
So maybe speak to you about it tomorrow once you've got a chance to catch up on it.
We'll see. I probably won't catch up on it. So
Ignore it.
yeah.
The best way to deal with it. Isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, guys. Spanish.
Ooh. An icy exchange.
I mean, Sergio's he's not necessarily a likable character. I mean, I know that at least his behavior on the golf course is typically something that does not necessarily endear people to him. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty typical. If you've been watching the way that the live golfers have been interacting with the media, because they feel like they're being, they are being ostracized. They shouldn't feel like they're being ostracized. They are being ostracized because of a professional decision that they made. Now, they knew that was something associated with the risk of entering live golf, and we'll see how long live golf continues to find this sustainable. They have a television partner right now. This is sports business stuff. But, do you know where live golf's television rights are currently?
Oh, isn't it? Remind me. It's where you watch Andy Griffith, right?
It's on the CW.
Yeah, CW.
I could not tell you the last time I watched anything on a channel that was at least at some point in its lifetime CW. It was Saturday morning cartoons when you're in second and first grade, right? Warner, I think it was WB, not CW. Whenever that change was made network-wise. Anyway, that's where live golf's rights are. So I don't know if that's sustainable. They need a legitimate television partner in the United States to make up for the amount of money and at least get close to making up for the amount of money that they are offering these golfers to join.
We all agree that Tiger on Sunday being in contention would be far and away the best thing for the Masters as far as ratings, right? That's bar none.
All that matters in golf, truly.
Would the second most beneficial thing for the Masters in terms of rating be a live golfer against a PGA golfer down to the wire?
I think so. I really do. I mean, if I'm looking for, like I started the segment, I'm looking for the most interesting story. The most interesting story is a live golfer winning this thing. Just to see because the Masters champion is going to put on his green jacket. He's going to get up in front of a press conference and be asked about Saudi blood money.
I want Rory and Brooks Koepka within one stroke of each other on the back nine on Sunday.
Well, and I don't know how closely, you probably haven't been following this very closely, but Rory has gone both ways on this. Rory came out as one of the strongest voices against people joining the Live Tour. And since then has been yeah, you know what? It's kind of pushed the PGA Tour to make some of the changes that players were upset about in the first place, that made them feel like the money was worth it. The money alone was worth it to go join the LIV Tour. So he's kind of backtracked on that after being one of the most strident opinions out there about what it meant for these people to be joining LIV Golf.
He's 4 over today through 9. So maybe I'll find another option for that PGA golfer on Sunday.
He is not. He just can't manage at Augusta. It's so. I mean, I know he was a runner-up last year, but like he gets into these spots consistently where he's not able to perform the way that you would expect him to. Final hour coming up next. We're going to talk about one position of need that Titans fans are not talking near enough about. We'll tell you that. You'll hear some Greg Cosell analysis coming up next. I'm Buck Rising. It's 104.5 The Zone.
It is 12:02. Good afternoon from the Superbook.com Sports Desk. I'm Lucas Panzica, starting with a Seymour Putters Masters update. Day 2 in Augusta, and Brooks Koepka maintains the lead at 12 under. His day is over. Jason Day at 9 under through 14 has sole possession of second on the leaderboard for the moment. Victor Hovland and John Rahm at 7 under, tied for third, yet to tee off. In fact, Hovland teeing off right as we speak. The Nashville Predators are inching closer to that playoff line. Last night was a 3-0 win over the Hurricanes. They are 1 point from the final playoff spot in the West with 4 games left in the regular season. The next 2 games against the 2 teams that stand between the Preds and a postseason berth, the Jets and the Flames. Tomorrow night, it's a road trip to Winnipeg, taking on the Jets, a 6 p.m. puck drop. College baseball, the 8th-ranked Vols fell to the Gators on Thursday 6-1. They'll play Game 2 against Florida tonight at 6. Vanderbilt 10-0 in SEC play for the first time in program history after beating Missouri 7-6. Game 2 in Columbia is tonight at 6. For all your foundation repair and waterproofing needs, visit USSTN.com. Breaking news at once on your home for the Titans and Vols. This is 104.5 The Zone.
Final hour of the week for us. Been a lot of fun. We're not quite done yet, though. Happy to have you guys until 1 o'clock before we turn things over to Blaine and Mickey. 615-737-1045. You want to jump in with us for the last hour, you are welcome to do so. Got some Titans discussion to have and a look at a quarterback situation with the University of Tennessee. One player turned analyst, providing some context on the 2023 starter. We'll let you hear that from the Paul Feinbaum Show here in just a little bit. But we've discussed so many obvious positions of need for the local professional football team that I feel like one has gone under the radar, underrated, underdiscussed, however you want to look at this. But it's pretty glaring. It's pretty important, and the solutions that you have on the roster right now could be best described as we'll see. Now, inside linebacker is not by most draft analysts, not by most analysts, I think, typically considered a premium position in the NFL at this stage of the game. But there are so many different reasons why the way analysts view things is different from the way that a coaching staff views things. Coaching staff is viewing things on, okay, if I have a player in a limited position or a player who has limits in a particular position, that inherently limits what I'm able to do defensively in this case. So to view off-ball linebacker as a non-premium position, while that logic makes sense to us as we discuss different players and at different groups, in the draft, that's not necessarily the way that football people are talking about this, because they're just trying to find the best players to put out there to make sure that they can execute as much of their schemes as humanly possible. So we haven't talked a lot about inside linebackers other than to look at the David Long contract and be like, really, for that? That's all it cost? That was, I think, not surprising, but kind of a good way to convey the message that the free agent market does not value these players very much. There are some guys at the top of the positions that'll get paid, but for the most part, you can find these dudes, and you can find them cheaper, even still, than 2 years, $11.5 million, like David Long is making with the Miami Dolphins right now. Titans are going with third-round pick Monty Rice and Azeez Al-Shaair, who is a former San Francisco 49er that I think has a lot more potential than has had opportunities to display that potential and turn it into real quantifiable tape. Though he has gotten a great amount of playing time because of injuries to Dre Greenlaw specifically. Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw, the two inside backers, two All-Pros in San Fran. So now they have two players who could start for them But that's a pretty important position within this defense. Now, you can look at a couple of different off-ball linebackers in this draft class and say, okay, there's a lot that makes sense. There's a lot of guys who, I'm sure if Rand Carthon was to be asked about them, he would say, oh, that's reminiscent of Mike Vrabel, because that's who Rand Carthon brings up in every media availability ever, it would seem. Mike Vrabel.
Now, Chance Campbell remains under contract, right? Obviously, draft pick from last seventh round draft pick.
Seventh round. He was not the last. He was either their last draft pick or Theo Jackson was. I can't remember.
No, I believe Jackson was a sixth rounder.
But yeah, Chance Campbell is still out there. And if they can find functional snaps at a Dr. Gibby, they could theoretically do it out of Chance Campbell, even though you can't pair Chance Campbell with Monty Rice. You don't have a coverage linebacker in that spot. Those two are a redundancy, and you need somebody to be able to operate in your nickel and somebody you trust more in coverage. Now, Monty, I think, is going to be a capable player in the way that we talked about. They drafted Jayon Brown in the 5th round. They replaced him with 6th-round pick David Long, and they can probably do the same with another day 2 or day 3 pick at inside linebacker. Monty's a 3rd-round pick. He played for one of the most impressive defenses in college football at Georgia, and the Achilles injury set him back. And also, they had a little bit of a logjam at the position where Rashawn and Jayon and David Long and trying to figure out who was getting snaps where. So now Monty's got a real opportunity, but based on what we've seen from him so far and the traits that he had coming out of college, he's not David Long. He's more Rashawn. He's more Zach Cunningham. So now, inside linebacker, I think, becomes a need. Alshair's on a 1-year contract, and he can earn an additional opportunity here. But I almost think that if you're already choosing not to pay off-ball linebackers, then what would continue to prompt you to do so? Though the durability factor that we've talked about a lot and that Mike Vrabel was asked about is often cited as one of the biggest reason, if not the biggest reason, that David Long is no longer a Titan. So I was asking Greg Cosell yesterday. We did an episode, or I guess that was Wednesday, asking Greg Cosell the other day about a lot of these off-ball linebacker prospects, just because I'm curious. I bet they take one. They've got 6 picks. I bet one of them's an inside linebacker. Dylan Cole is an unrestricted free agent, so they may have the ability to bring him back. I thought he played quite well, but he does have deficiencies. It's the Nick Westbrook-Akina complex. You're getting good snaps out of him. You know you can trust him, but he just has a clear and obvious talent ceiling that is going to get exposed far more often than it seems obvious, but that a better player would. We'll see how they choose to address it. So we're going to play some Greg Cosell audio for you coming up next, and you can hear the analysis of one in particular who I think makes a lot of sense in this system, because we went through 4 off-ball linebacker prospects that I think Titans fans should be keeping an eye about. So we'll hear from Greg Cosell here in just a second. What we will do, though, is I will remind you that you can lend your support to the great work that our teammate Kayla Anderson is doing for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. Kayla is raising money right now for her LLS campaign, and 104.5 The Zone is proud to be a participant in this fundraising event. It's the Visionaries of the Year campaign to help fight against blood cancer. All donations greatly appreciated and tax deductible. To donate, visit 1045thezone.com/Team Kayla, or if you're watching us on Zone TV when we go to break, there's a QR code. You just take a picture of that with your phone and you can donate right there. Greg Cosell analysis of some off-ball linebacking prospects that you should be paying attention to coming up next.
Hey, it's Kayla Anderson from 104.5 The Zone's morning show. Ramon, Kayla, and Will, and I am a proud participant in this year's Visionaries of the Year campaign for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, and I have a special friend with me now. Olivia, you are battling this as we speak, and I know that treatments, they're not easy, right? And Dare to Dream, that's a campaign that is pushing for safer treatments for younger people just like you. How old are you? 10 years old, and it's not easy going through this. Can you talk about what it's been like?
It's been just really hard with all the needles, treatment, medicine, all that.
Yeah, and this is something that you are going to win. You're going to win this battle, but we need all the help we can get to get the education out there. Our Dare to Dream campaign for, again, safer use in some of the things that are being done with the treatment. So Olivia, we always appreciate your time and we are proud of you. You are going to continue this fight and you can always donate. Every dollar counts. Just click on that QR code at the top of Zone TV, or you can just visit the Zone's website at 1045thezone.com.
Plenty today. We'll talk about, I'm sure, a lot of these prospects as well. So, off-ball linebacker, looking at a couple of different fits in this year's draft class. Now, I don't know necessarily how you have them stacked or ranked. I think that depends on how the various clubs will look at them on their respective draft boards. If you heard Coach Mack's interview at 11:20, you know that he's getting ready. He and Rhett Bryan are getting ready to start potting players into various groups so that if one player gets taken at one position, then you have a pot of players who you've grouped together to be able to choose from to decide how that is that fits a specific need. So whether NFL teams have already done their potting, for lack of a better term, or if Mack is just getting to that in his respective process is a different matter. But Drew Sanders out of Arkansas is definitely one of the top off-ball linebackers in this class. Now, I'd be curious to know what Lucas thinks of Henry To'oTo'o as a pro prospect here in just a second, but I want you to hear Greg Cosell's analysis of Drew Sanders and an exchange about why we think he would make the most sense here in Tennessee.
Yeah, and keep in mind, he made the switch to stacked linebacker at Arkansas after spending 2 years at Alabama as an edge pass rusher. And obviously he decided to transfer because they still had Will Anderson and they have Dallas Turner, who's likely to be a top 10 or top 15 pick next year. I thought he consistently showed the traits needed to play at a pretty high level. I mean, he almost always aligned to the passing strength of the offensive formation. And for a player who has not really played stacked linebacker before, Buck, I thought he showed a quick trigger in the run game. I thought he saw things pretty well. The concern when a player doesn't play off the ball is that's a whole different worldview from playing on the ball. It expands your view. You have to see more things, and you have to be able to diagnose more things more quickly. And I thought that he showed an ability to do that. Now, did it happen every single time? Of course not, because he was new to the position. But there's he showed short area explosiveness to slip blocks without losing any gap integrity, stayed in his gap, but slipped blocks. He's aggressive. He took on blocks. He's a big man. He's almost 6'5", 235. I would bet he could probably gain 5-10 pounds without that being a problem. He played fast. Great play speed, pursuit range, made a lot of plays running down people. He's very competitive. I think he can develop into kind of an impact playmaker type. Now, he needs to improve his tackling. That was a little bit of an issue. And he was also used as a pass rusher. And because he has pass rush in his background, he had some really strong pass rushes. But at his core, he was a stacked linebacker a year ago at Arkansas. I'm pretty sure that's the way teams will see him. But he certainly can line up on the ball and rush the quarterback.
Well, and that I think that gives him, for example, the first thing that pops into my mind is the way that they like to run for here in Tennessee, for example, those zone exchange pressures that we talked about, where David Long would be the fourth rusher in a certain situation, and they might drop Bud Dupree or whomever the outside linebacker in any particular situation where they chose to use one of those pressures. That's immediately the skill set that pops into my head.
And it's a great point because they did that a ton. When Elijah Molden was healthy, the two players who were used as fourth rushers when they went to these zone exchange concepts, meaning they still only rushed four, but the fourth rusher was either a corner or a safety or a linebacker. And the two players who were the predominant fourth rusher when they did this concept was Elijah Molden and David Long. So, Sanders could certainly, if he were to be there and play, he certainly could fill that role as a fourth rusher because he is a very good pass rusher.
So that's Greg Cosell's analysis and why it makes sense within this Titans defense, because they do deploy that zone exchange pressure a lot. Molden was unavailable last year. Long was very effective doing that. And when you see moments, Bud Dupree's not on the roster anymore, but for example, Harold Landry when he gets dropped into coverage. A lot of people get bent out of shape about the idea that Harold's getting dropped into coverage. He's your best edge rusher. What are you doing dropping him into coverage? But they don't notice how effective Elijah Molden in his rookie year and David Long the last 2 years have been as the fourth rusher when they drop Harold. It's not that they're just rushing three in those moments because you get distracted by the idea that 58 is floating off into zone coverage. And by the way, Harold does those things pretty well. They do have that's one of the best defensive tactics that they employ against a player like Josh Allen, where you just need to make that dude think for an extra fraction of a second when the ball is snapped because he's seeing something different at the line of scrimmage than he's accustomed to seeing when he's getting the ball. So that's been a really effective tool for the Titans defense. They want to continue to be able to execute those things effectively, one would imagine. Drew Sanders makes a lot of sense within that scheme.
Where in the draft?
I would anticipate, I would have to think that he is a first-round pick. And I think 11 is too high. I don't see a scenario where there's not a single off-ball linebacker taken in the first round this year, because I do think, there's a couple of interesting players. Like, we haven't talked about Trenton Simpson at Clemson. We haven't talked about Jack Campbell at Iowa. And then there's guys like Deion Henley who are more raw as far as a toolsy player at Washington State.
You mentioned To'o.
To'o, I don't think To'o is a starting linebacker in the league.
Yeah, I don't know about To'o either. He's almost a technician, very assignment based. He's going to know what to do, but I don't think he's going to stack up athletically with a lot of guys. He certainly couldn't cover very well when he was at Tennessee.
Well, now see, I kind of dispute the idea that, technique wise, I'm not going to question his technique. I just don't think he's got great eyes. Like, he loses things in traffic. And he's not athletically gifted because he's not a big dude.
No.
I was shocked how small he looked without pads on at the combine.
He won't be the bigger, faster, stronger guy.
But he's not even the best diagnosing guy, which I think is the larger issue there.
Yeah, like David Long's not the big, strong, fast, athletic freak of an inside linebacker.
No, and it took him some time to get on the field. But once David started to get reps, started to recognize things, be able to key and diagnose the way that you hear Coach Mack use that terminology a lot. He was, what's the word I'm looking for? He's a Tasmanian devil in there. I don't think To'o is that, because he's tough. I think he's productive in college.
Oh, yeah.
But not, I think there are moments when you see him correctly diagnose things, but there are other moments where he just gets lost in traffic and you can tell that he doesn't have the athletic ability to make up for that once he's out of position. But they do need an inside linebacker. They need probably somebody who's going to play special teams. I don't know if that's still Monty. I don't know if that's Alshire. I don't know how a rookie factors into this. But I do think that one of these 6 draft picks, if it's only 6 picks, if they don't trade up or move down to lose or gain draft capital, I would have to think that this team is somebody who's going to address an off-ball linebacker spot, given how important it is, the role that David Long was occupying for them.
Drew Sanders would be fun in this defense. I just don't know how you can maneuver around in a way to draft him if he's going to go that early. Well, I saw Will Brinson of CBS had him 8th overall to the Falcons.
It depends on the need, right? It depends on how teams view these things. Again, I think a lot of people are going to talk about off-ball linebackers as a non-premium position. And again, I remind you that that's not the way that NFL coaching staffs look at these guys. How can I win a matchup? Who can allow me to use the most possible concepts that I know we've had success with within my defense? And how can I use that player's talent to overcome a talent deficiency elsewhere because maybe I can't play man-to-man the way that I want to because I don't have the corners to do that. Maybe I can't rush the passer the way that I want to because I don't have the guys up front to be able to do that as well. I just think that an off-ball linebacker, especially one that displays versatility and pass rush tools, that I think is a borderline under at least a previous administration. That's a Titans wet dream. Michael in Nashville is next. Hey, Michael.
The guy they just picked up from Dallas, and they mentioned him.
Oh, Luke Gifford.
Luke. I mean, supposed to be, he led Dallas and he plays for special teams. I mean, that takes care of your problem right there.
I don't know that it necessarily takes care of the problem, but it is certainly a factor in this. And we haven't talked about a lot about Luke Gifford because people don't necessarily, I think, get caught up in the special teams linebacker discussion. But he plays special teams. The reporting on him by, I think it was Todd Archer, the Cowboys ESPN beat writer, said that the Cowboys staff considered him somebody who could play an elevated role. It's basically a lot of what we talk about with this draft class.
And we've seen that from the Titans. Special team linebackers that excel on special teams getting an opportunity. Dylan Cole is the perfect example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but Dylan Cole's limited. You need better players.
But Luke Gifford's going to factor in.
Yeah, Gifford is Cole. But they're hoping with higher upside. Because you saw sometimes Dylan Cole, I thought, had one of the best games I've seen a linebacker play for them in a long time this season. I can't remember exactly the opponent, and then turn around and got smoked in coverage a couple of different times the following week. Like, teams are just going to be able to pick up on that too often if you don't have the horses to be able to overcome. But Michael's right. Luke Gifford does factor into that equation.
I saw Rand Carthon talking about Gifford. I'm trying to remember if it was with Jim Wyatt.
It's probably on Wyatt's timeline. I think Wyatt had one with every free agent. He asked Carthon specifically.
It was either with Jim or Titans Amy. Forgive me, I can't remember who it was. But he said that and maybe he said it multiple times, but when they picked up Gifford, that the Cowboys special teams coordinator texted him and said, "You got my guy. Took my guy from me."
So is there another position that we're not talking enough about with the Titans? Because I think off-ball linebacker would probably be the one that I'd submit. The needs are so many and so varied that it's easier to talk about the positions that they don't need versus the positions that they do. I don't necessarily think that there's a position that they don't need right now. I think they could do with players at every position as they try and replenish depth on top of starting caliber talent.
Don't need a long snapper.
That's right. Morgan Cox, year 15, University of Tennessee's own. Yeah, they don't need a long snapper. That's the list. Speaking of starters, Hendon Hooker has been doing more media than any other prospect out there, because that's all Hendon Hooker can do in this NFL draft process. But he made an appearance on the Paul Feinbaum show yesterday. He was asked specifically by Paul. I don't know if the exchange is in here, Lucas, but he was asked specifically by Paul to put on his analyst hat to talk about Joe Milton within this Tennessee offense, given that the Tennessee offense is a big point of discussion in the draft process right now. Here was Hendon Hooker with Paul Feinbaum yesterday.
Eyes now are on Joe Milton, your friend and compatriot these last couple of years. Let me make you an ESPN analyst for a second. Tell us about him and what we should all expect this fall.
Joe Milton is a pure passer of the football, has a rocket for an arm, can also use his legs in the run game. Complete quarterback, can be a field general, can be that leader that you need in the huddle, can generate energy on the field, off the bench. Whenever you need him to make a play, he can do that, and he can also put your offense in a great position to win ball games. Great guy and one of my best friends.
Now, it's fair to assume that Hendon Hooker likes Joe Milton a lot. Their relationship has been very well documented because it is unique. the way that they're clearly very close despite the situation that both of them have been put in. Because I don't remember, Jalen Hurts was talked about and Tua were talked about as being two upstanding individuals capable of being mature enough to handle the situation that they were in.
And they seem to have a really good relationship.
Yes, and maybe it was just by nature of how much Tennessee was covered this year that was a big talking point. But I don't remember that being made such a big deal with Tua and Hurts the way that it has been with Hooker and Milton.
Well, with Tua and Hurts, it was more about the quarterback competition in general. It was about Tua displacing Hurts.
The famous Maria Taylor quote.
Right. I'm not gonna, so quit asking. It was less about their relationship and more about the on-field dynamic. There was no question about who Tennessee's starter was when Hendon Hooker displaced Joe Milton after Milton got hurt.
So, fair to assume that Hendon Hooker is not giving you the most unbiased analysis, but can Hooker succeed within the system? We put it to a poll. What's Tennessee's ceiling with with Joe Milton at quarterback in 2023? At Buck Rising is where you can vote on the polls. We'll update all of them here in a little bit. But Lucas, what's the feedback generally been? What's the vibe from Vols fans as they weigh in on the poll?
Well, I put 8, 9, 10, or 11 plus wins.
All right, you gave them options.
So what do you think is the favorite?
I would say 9 is probably going to be the most popular voting option.
No, that was the second least popular.
Oh, really?
11 or more.
Okay. Now,
but again, ceiling is a very loose term, right? It's very flexible. Ceiling, like if everything were to go perfectly for Joe Milton, could Tennessee essentially repeat what they did?
What you're saying is we should have asked a better question. What's the floor for Tennessee with Joe Milton? Because I think the floor is more interested in the
You're probably right.
Ceiling.
You're right. Because the ceiling is probably what they did last year, right?
Yeah.
That's probably the ceiling.
Well, that would be tough. Even if the offense is particularly helpful for quarterbacks and wide receivers, I think it would be very, very difficult to replicate the kind of production that Hendon Hooker just had.
Right, but that's best case scenario across the board. Tennessee is deeper in other positions where they struggled with depth last season, at corner, at running back.
They're a better overall
team. At the pass
team.
rush, they are a better overall football team. I know Jalen Hyatt and Cedric Tillman are out the door, but they feel perfectly fine about what they have at wide receiver. And they're deeper there as well. They have more options there as well. So, yeah, I think if everything for Joe Milton were to go the way it did for Hendon Hooker as far as production goes, then yes, I think you could say that is the ceiling. Talking about an 11-win season. That is best case scenario, though. The floor, you're right. The floor is probably a better discussion.
I mean, I think it's definitely more interesting to talk about because he's such a variable still, despite having, I mean, it's not the biggest sample size at Michigan, but it was enough for me to be hugely skeptical of him when he transferred to Tennessee. The results were about what I expected them to be at Tennessee, and then the injury forced their hand to put Hooker in the lineup. Hooker goes on the run to make this one of the best offenses in the history of the program, and early discussions, and really for the majority of the season, discussions about being a Heisman candidate. And then Milton gets out there and plays very well against the Clemson defense. A team that it felt like might have motivations to try harder than the average bowl game might indicate that they did, because I think Dabo Swinney was trying to prove some things to a lot of people. And in fact, I think for Dabo's case, losing that game was the best possible scenario, because if they had not been starting Cade Klubnik for an entire season and he looked better in the bowl game, then people would have been on Dabo's neck real quick.
I wasn't confident going into the Clemson game.
Now, why? Just because you don't know what to do with Milton.
Well, I thought, and I probably overreacted to a really good performance by Klubnik against North Carolina in the ACC championship game. But I thought
a lot of people did. You weren't alone.
I thought we were going to see the best version of the 2022 Clemson Tigers against Tennessee in the Orange Bowl. And I still think you could make an argument that if Cade Klubnik was the guy throughout the course of last season, then maybe Clemson would be in the playoff. If a one-loss ACC champion Clemson would have gotten into the playoff over a one-loss non-Big 12 champion TCU, I think that would have, would you agree that probably would have happened?
I think that's understanding that we have the results in hand. I think that he looked a lot worse than I expected him to because of the lack of opportunities that he's had.
Yeah. But if Klubnik had been able to help Clemson beat South Carolina, then I think Clemson could have been in the playoffs. So that was my logic there. Was I thought Tennessee was going to get the best version of Clemson, a playoff caliber team, and that didn't happen. I mean, Klubnik looked like a true freshman in that game. It was a credit to the Tennessee defense, but he made some true freshman mistakes in that game, and Joe Milton, I thought, looked better than anybody anticipated. Milton wasn't that good in the Vanderbilt game. Like, going into the Clemson game, there was not much of a sample size to say that this is going to be a big-time performance by Joe Milton. It just didn't matter because Tennessee ran for over 300 yards in the Vanderbilt game. But he wasn't on point as far as accuracy goes in that game. So we didn't have that sample size, and now we do.
It's going to happen. I mean, it's just good. I'm assuming that there's going to be 3 to 4, I think, is probably a reasonable sample size throughout the course of a 12-game regular season where I'm looking at Joe Milton and be like, I don't know. You know? Like, it just feels like he has that opportunity for variance. Now, he can clean that up. This is his job. Nico may push him, but unless something, I think, drastic happens in the next couple of months, this starting quarterback job for the Tennessee Vols belongs to Joe Milton. How he capitalizes on that opportunity better than he did the first time around remains to be seen. Now, we have some audio from Josh Heupel. Lucas, put this into context because I think he was asked kind of about the offense and how it's being discussed by people in the draft process.
Yeah, that's obviously a big talking point with Hendon Hooker right now in the Tennessee offense, and maybe how little is put on the quarterback, kind of being used against Hendon Hooker a little bit. And instead of starting with Heupel, we'll start with Kirby. And Kirby had what could be perceived as maybe not a veiled shot directly at Tennessee, but at offenses like Tennessee's when asked about the quarterback position, because Georgia's undergoing a big QB battle right now.
Demeanor and communication. So, like, I can get the stats, but it's like a true quarterback is a decision maker. In our system, because some systems take all the pressure off the quarterback and they just go really fast, we don't do that. We're a quarterback-driven offense. So can you process the information? That means get the signal, get people lined up, then see what the defense is in and figure out, are we in the right situation? Which of these 3 choices Coach Bobo's given me am I going to utilize on this play? And then the play happens, and there might be a mistake or a breakdown, and you not go full metal jacket and have catastrophe mode and put us in a bad situation. So, decision making is the number one thing I want to see at the quarterback position. Can you make consecutive decisions over and over that don't cost our team games? Because we have enough playmakers and we have enough plays that you will make a play inevitably. Don't make a bonehead play. And that's what we're trying to avoid.
It's just spoken like a true defensive coach. Don't make a boneheaded play. Don't turn the ball over. Don't put the defense back on the field.
So here's Heupel yesterday.
Our guys control everything. I don't think there's anybody in America that puts more on their quarterbacks. Run checks, run pass checks, load the boxes, alerts, kills. They got to do it all. And so he's highly instrumental in the efficiency and effectiveness of our run game.
So you heard both sides of things. That you think Kirby's feeling threatened by Tennessee?
No.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
I don't think so.
I wouldn't. There's no reason to. You still have the best players. You're still kings of the sport for a second straight year. Last call for phone calls, 615-737-1045. Last call for phone calls for the week for us. Blaine and Mickey, 3HL, of course, later. But we'll wrap things up for our portion of the programming coming up next. So this song makes me happy. It's why we play it at the end of every Friday show. And also we had to find a different solution to Kanye after the whole anti-Semitism thing. You know, we adapt on the fly. But I like this song, not just because it's a good song, but have you ever seen Boogie Nights?
Yes.
Mark Wahlberg movie.
Great movie.
I was looking for something to watch on HBO the other night. I think it was last weekend. And Boogie Nights was there. I had seen it in a long time. And I know the general premise. Dirk Diggler in the adult movie industry in
based on a true story.
1970s?
Yeah, 70s.
Which just, I mean, it's already, God, I can't even imagine what it is to be in that world to begin with. From a variety of different angles. But in the 70s, it's just a wild, wild west in a totally different way.
The true story is insane.
Well, it's like a 3-hour movie.
Yeah, it's very long.
But
great
soundtrack
cast.
and the cast are exceptional.
Burt Reynolds.
So good. Luis Guzman.
Yep, Heather Graham.
Mark Wahlberg. I wonder, how old was Mark Wahlberg in that movie? Because that had to have been one of the first major roles.
I think that might have been his first like big blockbuster, and he's in there. Julianne Moore, like just an all-star cast.
Yeah, it just that's the music that plays in the background while Roller Girl rolling around.
You say you were going to the movies this weekend?
I am going to the movies. I'm going to go see the
Barbie movie.
No,
oh no, that doesn't come out till later.
I would though.
I might check that out.
Would you? That sounds like it might be a different kind of a trip to the movies. Air is what I'm going to see.
Oh, yes.
The story about Michael Jordan's deal with Nike and how it came to be. I haven't been to the movies. Okay, I know I have been more recently than when The Revenant came out.
That's the last one you remember.
That's the last one I remember going to see.
Yeah, that was 2015.
I largely think that movies in the last, I would say, 5 years are just remakes because we have run out of original thoughts with which to make movies. Because if the most original thought that we can come up with is Cocaine Bear, then we are officially lost and doomed as a film society, which makes me very sad.
But the experience of going to the movies is better than ever. I mean, it's incredible. I know you said you haven't been recently.
I know that I have seen something in a movie at a movie theater in the last calendar year. Because I love the Green Hills movie theater is great.
Yeah, go to Green Hill or the AMC in Bellevue. Like, it is insane, the luxury that you can watch movies in a movie theater nowadays.
But I couldn't for the life of me think, and I think it's just because the quality of movies are just crap in really the last 5 years. Like, I really haven't liked anything that I've seen. And even the stuff that I like the Elvis movie, I have so many problems with the Elvis movie just because I don't like the fake Dutch accent, Tom Hanks. Get out of here. I don't like that it's so much of it. And just, why is everything so long? Boogie Nights almost 3 hours. Get it to me in an hour and a half and be done with it. Just because I'll binge 6 hours of a popular television show does not mean I want to sit still for your 3 hour movie. Or whatever it was on Netflix. The Irishman. Polls? Oh, wait.
I'm going to make you an offer you can't refuse.
I was supposed to plug something for you.
Because the polls have closed and the votes have been tallied. It's time for a poll update. And he's a good boy. Buck Rising show producer and correspondent, Lucas Panzica.
Presented by Two Rivers Ford, who sells below MSRP on any non-specialty new Ford.
Now wait, plug your thing because I forgot to and I'm a bad friend.
Nashville SC at home, Toronto FC at Geodis Park tomorrow night, 7:30 kickoff. Julia Lanibaba and I have the call on 104.5 The Zone.
Yeah, I'm going again. Hopefully I don't throw up in a trash can.
You going to get an empanada?
I still haven't had one.
That's crazy.
I just, I don't buy food when I go in there.
Get an empanada.
Okay, but if I get to go to a sporting event, like I want to consume things that are not going to tamp down the buzz. Like I want to go and enjoy myself.
Get an empanada.
All right, I'll get an empanada.
What is the most under-discussed Titans draft need? Eldon says edge rusher.
Off-ball linebacker for me. I really think that's the only one. I think we've talked about edge. I think we've talked about tight end, offensive line, wide receiver, even quarterback for probably entirely too much time. Given that they only have 6 draft picks. But off-ball linebacker is something that I think is sneaky big.
But you know what? These are good submissions by Brian, Darius, Noah. I'll say kicker. We haven't talked at all about how the Titans are going to address replacing Randy Bullock.
Well, they have the one on the roster.
Shudak?
Yeah. I mean, they'll probably add another one. It's just, if my position on kicker is if they don't care, why should I?
What is Tennessee's ceiling with Joe Milton? 41% say 11 or more wins. 28% say it's 10 wins. 18% say 9. 13% say 8.
I think that the floor conversation is more interesting than the ceiling discussion. But I do think that Joe Milton is capable of winning 9 to 10 games for Tennessee.
What is the last movie you saw in theaters? Eldon says Top Gun Maverick, great choice. Michelle says John Wick 4, which is currently out. I definitely want to go check
I never
that
saw
out.
a single one of those either.
Skinny says 2 words, Buck, cocaine, bear.
I heard that was terrible.
Really?
Oh, so bad. And I got excited because, the director.
Elizabeth
Banks. She's done really good stuff. And, I was like, okay, at least it's something different. At least it's not just a remake of The Lion King, live-action Lion King, or whatever laziness we're trotting out there so that they have content to put on Disney Plus afterwards. Give me something. And I heard it was just absolute dog water.
I saw Babylon a couple months ago, which I did enjoy. That also a 3+ hour long movie.
No.
But
that's the first thing I look for. That's the biggest reason I don't see movies. If I see it's more than 2.5 hours, I'm not going to see.
I mean, if you think you would enjoy Margot Robbie and Brad Pitt totally unhinged in the Roaring 20s Hollywood setting, then I think you would like it.
What's different about her unhinged with Leo DiCaprio in Wolf of Wall Street? I've seen that thing. Find me something new.
How many points will the Preds take from the next 2 games? 46% say 3 or 4. 33% say just 2. 12% say 1. 9% say 0. They lose both.
It's going to be hard. I don't think they lose both games, but I think it's going to be tough to lose or to win both. I mean, they're 1 point back right now, both of those teams. Love to see them get in the playoffs. They could prove a lot to a lot of different people.
Those are polls.
Excellent. That's the show. Listen to Lucas tomorrow on the call for the Nashville SC game. If you're at the stadium, stop by, say hi. I'm looking forward to hanging out at Geodis Park. Have a fantastic weekend. No primetime show on Sunday night because it's Easter, and my parents will string me up if I don't go to Evansville, Indiana for at least a couple hours. So I will talk to you when the radio show starts Monday at 10 a.m.